Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Exit Talks. Today, my guest and I are going to talk about the misconceptions of feminism, our personal roads to feminism, and our favorite pop idol, Taylor Swift. I promise you these things are absolutely related. We're not going to focus on the history behind the feminist movement, but more the modern social impact that feminism has on pop culture. As a disclaimer, our discussions of feminism will be coming from a white gay man and a white woman, and for the sake of this interview, although we can't personally represent the views of black and other minority women and trans women, our feminism is 100% inclusive. We do not exclude anyone. Hi, Emily. Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
I think first, as I do with all my guests, we should talk a little bit about our friendship.
Yeah, absolutely. So we met when we were in college.
So freshman year, we were in a learning community for teachers, but we didn't become friends super right away.
No, it was definitely more so like sophomore year. We became closer. We became friends. We started hanging out more, going to lunch more. And that kind of solidified it more so outside of class than ever inside of class.
And I worked in the dining hall. So when I got off or on my breaks, I would come sit with you and our other friends. So ever since then, I moved to your town and we've been very close ever since. So we're going to get started. And the first question I want to ask you today is, what is feminism?
So I'd like to be really quick in saying that my interpretation of terminology in this episode is really strictly that. It's my own interpretation. So for me, feminism is the advocating for or the advocacy of equal rights for all people, regardless of their gender or identity. While it's rooted in equal rights of both men and women, I think in the nitty-gritty of it, it's really the advocacy of equal rights socially, politically, economically, and personally for women, particularly marginalized groups of women.
Yeah, so I think people hear the word feminism and they get scared. My short version is, as you can do a quick Google search, it's just equality of the sexes. And as we're going to talk about, the ideas of feminism is uplifting both men and women at the end of the day, but as we will discuss, women societally and historically may need it a little bit more. So about when did you first hear the word feminism?
So I feel lucky in that I vividly remember being in middle school and there being a really big push for women to join the STEM field. So they were having career fairs and things like that. And a lot of it was so centered on women joining STEM. I wanted to be an engineer for a few years when I was in middle school. So in that sense, I felt like there was at least in theory a pro-woman area of conversation, if that makes sense. But that said, like when I reflect on it, it almost felt performative. A lot of the conversations revolved around women having to do twice the amount of work to get to the same place as a man. We were still surrounded by those jokes so centered in sexism, racism, and ableism. So linking that to the concept of being a feminist, I understood the word as women being able to do what women wanted to do, which in theory is exactly what we want, but in reality there were so many misconceptions around the word that made people think that it was a negative.
How did your idea of feminism resonate with you as a woman and a young girl?
So I feel like for me, when I was in middle school, I don't think I even understood what the word was. I don't think it was in my mind. I don't think it was something that I thought of. And I think a lot of that comes from the privilege I had of being a middle class white girl. It wasn't something that came to mind because it wasn't important to me at that time. As strange as that sounds, it just wasn't high up on my list of things as a middle school girl.
And the reason I asked that question is because I am a man and I grew up as a boy, so I think our definitions and experiences would be different in that respect. The 2000s were a pretty politically incorrect time, which I think is hard for us to believe because it wasn't that long ago. So, the 2000s was a lot of R-word, racial jokes, women jokes, feminism. I thought at a time was a bad thing. It's one of those, what do you call them? Like zinger words. What's that? Do you know what I'm saying?
I know what you mean. It just was like something that was around us that was kind of like used as a punchline. It was right there for us.
So I think I was kind of right along with the 2000s culture of feminism is bad, jokes for women, like women belong in the kitchen, make me a sandwich. And my honest first impression of feminism was that they were crazy and bad. We're talking this was as a preteen and as a teenager.
And I think in that time, like I obviously wanted rights as a woman, but at that time it was so centered, like you said, on those jokes and on the making fun of women and the sandwich jokes and all of that, that you didn't want to identify as a feminist because that would make you the butt of a joke.
And I think as a young person, like you said, you may not be as in tune to the needs of marginalized people. So I definitely wasn't like women need help. I was like, they look fine to me, but that kind of thing. Do you identify as a feminist?
I do, and I find it really hard when people say they don't, if we're being completely honest.
I identify as a feminist, and we're going to talk about our feminist awakenings, but I have no hesitation in saying that I identify as a feminist.
And I think it took me a while to get there, but I completely agree with you. There's now no hesitation.
What have you done to help spread awareness for women's rights?
So as someone who works in education in schools, I feel like I walk a line in terms of what I should be saying and what I should not be saying. You'll hear these news stories about teachers who've lost their jobs over things that they've said or done or lessons that they've planned. And in certain cases, I really don't think that losing their job is warranted. That said, I'm really proud of myself because I feel like I've always remained true to my own beliefs, and I go out of my way to have hard conversations with my students. I think with little kids, it's important to just place the emphasis on the fact that you can do and be anything that you want to be, so long as you're kind and respectful. And I know that sounds so watered down, but I think placing the root in that concept makes it an easier thing for kids to understand. Kids are good at heart. So in the last several years, I've had students branch out of some of those strict gender roles we saw as kids. And so I try to read diverse texts and have conversations with my students that are in depth about how people have been treated differently based on their race or sex. Again, kids are good at heart. And when we have these hard conversations, I'm always left feeling hopeful for our future. Outside of school, I try to keep myself involved in current news media and on social media with advocating for women's rights and the things that I believe in, along with attending women's marches and things. I know we've done that together and doing some reading on the subject.
So my scapegoat always answer for this question is that I'm a U.S. history teacher. So when it comes to all marginalized groups, that is my activism.
Can you tell me a little bit about your journey to feminism and when you became comfortable identifying yourself as a feminist?
As I mentioned before, I think the cultural perception of feminism when we were growing up was bad. I definitely made women jokes at some point, and I'm embarrassed to say that as recently as my sophomore year, I had a professor who I'm actually very good friends with now, and she's appearing on another episode of the show, actually. She identifies as a feminist, and her now husband, came into the room while I was sitting there with her, and, she's like, "That's my boyfriend." And I was like, I didn't know feminists had boyfriends, my sophomore year of college. And her response, without even missing a beat, I don't even know if she remembers this, but she goes, "Well, the straight ones do." So that kind of really changed my perception. And also that year we took a trip to Seneca Falls, and that kind of really opened my eyes. I think because I was raised almost exclusively by women, we were raised in a matriarchy with my grandmother being kind of the center. And I was surrounded by strong women. And when it became apparent to me that women are marginalized and historically have fought for and gained rights, I immediately flipped and I was like, almost all the important people in my life are women. I want to fight for their rights. So after that trip to Seneca Falls, I started identifying as a feminist. And I think I brought some of my family members on a journey to kind of self-identify as feminists. I kind of helped educate them in that way. I thought about how all of these issues affect the most important people in my life and that I need to fight for them.
So I feel like the word feminist kind of landed in my lap around the same time that it did for you in college. Looking back, I'm sure I made women jokes even more recently than college because of how rooted they are and were in our society growing up. That said, I feel like college is when I really took ownership of that word for myself. I grew into myself and out of my shell. I became comfortable advocating for the things that I believed in, whether they personally affected me or whether they were affecting people that I was becoming friends with and that I had expanded my friend zone to include. As a woman, I was never anti-woman, and I grew up surrounded by really strong, powerful women like you said that you did. But I think my understanding of that word feminist expanded and solidified itself when we were in college. And that's when I took it on as a label that fit my life and that I was comfortable wearing.
What are some misconceptions about feminism? And I would like to start on this one. I wrote down man haters. I think people, when they hear the word feminism, they automatically go to, oh, so you hate men. So, that is just not true. Also, some common misconceptions is that if you're a feminist, you have, and this is like a big meme on Twitter right now, you have colored hair and pronouns. And actually, in 2016, there were a slew of anti-feminist videos. One of them was Big Red. I don't know if you ever saw it. She just she had red hair, she had glasses, and she's just like yelling about the patriarchy and she's swearing. I think she's a queen and an icon, to be perfectly honest. But I think when people hear feminism, they think, I'm going to say lesbian too. Like, that's a common misconception. Like, oh, you're a feminist, you're a lesbian, you hate men, you have colored hair, and you have pronouns.
And I completely agree with you. Like, if you're a feminist, you hate all men and you want women to surpass them and rule the world. And it sounds so ridiculous to even say it like that when the bottom line is we want equal rights for women.
Are women equal to men in today's society?
Looking at the most basic facts that white women still only make 93 cents for every dollar a white man makes tells me that they're not. Working mothers are still viewed differently, or at the very least seen as the one that needs to stay home when something comes up. If the kids are sick, it's the mom that needs to stay home. And even stay-at-home fathers are looked down upon. So I just think even when you look at our money, it's covered in white men from hundreds of years ago. And I'm not saying that they didn't do things that are important for our country or that were important for our country, but that's still the bottom line, that our money is even covered in white men. So do I think we've gotten better? Somewhat, but I think there's a really long way to go for women to be equal to men in today's society.
As Emily said, I think things have gotten way better from the times of like women couldn't even file for divorce against their husbands, even if they were raped in their marriage. The judge was like, what do you mean you're married? And that's like in the 1800s, right? Women could not vote. I mean, as recently as 1920. So yes, we've made a lot of strides towards equality. But my big thing is the president of the United States theoretically could be women, but in practice cannot be. And I say this to my kids in class. Yeah, theoretically a woman could become president, but I show, I have all their pictures, all the presidential portraits behind me. And I'm like, right now, it's not possible. It is not possible for a woman to become president until that happens. So, there's that whole glass ceiling thing you mentioned, making less money and only so high. I mean, we've got our first female vice president and, I hope it goes even higher from there.
And I wanted to jump right off of that and say, when you think about female presidents and wanting that to be the standard, as recently as our last election, I remember sitting with you at a dinner and saying, I do not think a woman can win. I do not think a woman can win. I think it needs to be a white man who runs against our current president to take him out of office. And I said that as a feminist, as someone who would love to see a woman in office. I said point blank, a woman will not beat Trump.
Right. Exactly. When we look at the 2016 election, you cannot deny that some people did not vote for Hillary Clinton simply because she's a woman. I mean, is she a good person? Absolutely not. People did not vote for her because there are people in this country who think that women are too emotional and that can't, and let's be, even their period will cause them to launch nuclear missiles. And to that I say, look at all the wars that men in our country have started because we've only had men leaders. And, so clearly it's not a woman thing in my opinion. But just as people didn't vote for Barack Obama because he was black, some people did not vote for Hillary Clinton because she was a woman. I want to add to this question, are women equal to men in today's society? I hate when you have, and we're just going to introduce the word now, meninists. Men who are not interested in getting equal rights for all sexes. Men who think, as you said earlier, that they are like dying out and being replaced and masculinity is going away and all that kind of stuff. I don't think it's a good example when feminism begins and ends with, well, if a woman hits a man, she should be hit back. That's equality. That's feminism. Also, when it comes to sexual assault, rarely taken seriously for women in this country, which is horrible. When it comes to sexual assault in this country, it is not taken seriously. And when it comes to women accusing men of sexual assault, there are men that come out and say, well, men are usually falsely accused. And like, that is the part of the sexual assault that they are concerned about. Does it happen? Absolutely. But that's the exception and that's not a rule. And actually, it's a double-edged sword because men are sexually assaulted and raped. And that could also not be taken seriously on the grounds that they are a man. And we're actually seeing right now in the news the Johnny Depp situation. In your opinion, what disadvantages do women face in our society today?
So I sort of talked about it already, but women still have to work harder to reach the same level as men, particularly like in talking about their jobs. So even with movements in the STEM field where we've seen more women join those science fields, the math fields, all of those things, women still make up a lower percentage of employees in those fields. It could be said that it's because of a lack of desire to be in those fields, but really I truly believe that it boils down to the fact that it's too hard to join those fields as a woman. Even now, even when they claim to be open, things like that. Even in education, a woman-dominated field, a lot of administration, those extreme higher ups are men. And I just feel like it's hard to be a woman and taken seriously sometimes.
Have you ever experienced that personally?
Yeah, so I feel like in talking about education, it's kind of an expectation that people want me to go into administration. And here's what I'll say, I don't have an interest in that. But at the same time, when you look at the people that are being recruited, the other people who were talked to at my schools in terms of becoming an administrator, it's disproportionately male. There's a lot of male teachers that they're asking to be administrators, when if you look at the makeup of teachers, particularly at that younger student level, at the elementary level, the number of teachers that are women far exceeds the number of men, but the men are the ones that people are asking to become administrators.
One thing that I want to mention about women in careers that you mentioned, teaching and nursing, are two very woman-dominated fields. And men who are in those fields can get crap for being in a woman-dominated profession. And then it's like you're almost saying like you're questioning their masculinity, and you're saying, what is the worst thing you can be? And the answer is a woman a lot of the times for those people.
I have a family friend who he is a nurse, and I remember telling my mom, like, he has become a nurse, and she was like, oh, really? And she has never said this, but there are people that when you say he's a nurse, they'll say, is he gay?
Right.
Like they'll jump right on that.
We may have a crowd of listeners who are apprehensive about feminism. And my question is, for those people, do women have any advantages in today's society? And I'll take the lead on this one. When it comes to advantages for women and disadvantages of men, I am not the ringleader. I am not jumping to the front of the charge. But just from a historical standpoint, I do have some information to offer. The first thing I want to say is that we have a history of the entire human race of men being the expendable warrior. Men go off and fight wars and die. That can be uncomfortable for men. And also, women are not eligible for the draft. So a draft is if you are selected for military service during a time of war, I think it's like the ages of 18 and 25, you go off and you fight in war, and you don't, and avoiding the draft can get you jail time, unless you have enough money to get out of it. Women are not eligible for the draft. Some people will say when they go to court for divorce, women often win the custody of kids. I know some fathers are upset about that, and like that it's guaranteed that they're going to get the kids, they're going to get the house, they're going to get all that kind of stuff. Some men say, or some people say, that women can get by on their looks. Some women have advantages where people will get them free things, or and I just have to say, sometimes on social media, when women show a little cleavage, there's always a part of me that's like, you know what you're trying to accomplish. And when I've talked to women, their take is kind of like, listen, I'm going to use what I got to my advantage, because let's be honest, it's not much. But in the same vein of women maybe having some advantages with their looks, that also comes at a disadvantage, because they are given unwanted attention, they are sexually harassed, they are followed, they are murdered, and it always comes back to, what was she wearing? And that is still such a jarring thing for me to take in. One other thing I wanted to add is emotionality. I don't know if anyone would consider this really an advantage, but women are able to be emotional, and it's almost expected of them. Where on the other edge of the sword, men can get crap for being emotional, and that causes men to become emotionally repressed, and not to be dramatic, but like commit murder. Like maybe that's why men commit more crimes, is because they are told that showing emotion is not okay.
So going right off of that, I just feel like for every advantage that you could say a woman has in society, I feel like it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
So I will say, for some people, they feel that they should be able to stay home with kids. They want to stay home with kids. And as a woman, that's something that more frequently is given to you. But again, I say double-edged sword, because what if that's not what you want, but that's what's expected of you?
Right.
So advantage as a woman to have the choice to stay home with your kids, great, unless it's not what you want. Advantage of not going into the draft, great. I'm assuming nobody really wants that.
Right.
But still, like, the want to serve your country, but being looked down upon for that as well. So I feel like there's advantages, but for every advantage that you offer as a woman in society, there are people who are going to say, well, actually, I feel like that's a disadvantage. You kind of even touched upon it with what women wear. Seen as an advantage when it gets you certain things, seen as a disadvantage when it gets you other things.
You're right, 100%. What if a woman is the breadwinner and makes the salary and the man is a stay-at-home dad? And that is something that is completely okay, but he will face social consequences for that. I have had someone say that they will not be with a woman if she makes more money than him. And I said, dude, that is a financially irresponsible decision. Sorry. There are still men in this society who have that mentality, and I think that's scary. The next question is, do men have any disadvantages in today's society? So I think we already touched on a couple of these. And again, I'm not leading this charge. I am just simply making aware of these types of things. And I'm not trying to give meninists any fuel for their arguments. But socially and historically, men have been considered expendable in that they're the ones that go off to war and die. There is a public distrust of men walking down the street at night, and I think that's rightfully so. I am a man and I am 6'6". I am sure people have been scared of me walking down the street. Does that make me uncomfortable? Yeah, it makes me feel bad that people would feel that way, but I understand. And I think that is the key. Enough women and enough people have gone through these experiences where I can very well be a threat to them. That is a weight that I will happily burden to try and make women feel more comfortable. I don't think every man would agree with me. They might say, well, why should I have to do that? But I care enough about women to go that extra mile and accept that that's something that I have to do. I talked a little bit about how men are often taught to suppress emotions, whereas women are expected to have them. I have to plug one of my favorite video essayists, Natalie Wynn, and her channel ContraPoints. She has a great video titled Men, where she goes into more examples of this. I would say the video is rated 18 up, so I wouldn't recommend it to a younger audience, but I think she just makes a lot more points than me better, but that's just the gist of some disadvantages. And she talks a little bit about how, as I said, sometimes men have to go the extra mile to show women walking down the street with them at night that they are not a threat.
I want to talk a little bit about what you said about male emotions, because this is something that has come up even as recently as the last few months right here where we live. There was a local university lacrosse goalie who just recently committed suicide. And the conversation around that has been about mental health and about the importance of men's mental health in particular. And I 100% agree, because men are typically taught to suppress those emotions. They don't talk about their feelings. They're not comfortable talking about their feelings because they never have in their lives. And you wonder, and you can always play that what if game, but you wonder if that had been a more open conversation, the way that people are fighting for it to be, would he still be here? Would the countless people who commit suicide, male or female, still be here if those conversations were being had? So that was just something that I wanted to touch upon, because I do think that emotions are huge. Again, can also be seen as a disadvantage for a woman being overly emotional, as we touched upon.
Well, I just want to add that I think meninists will jump to the argument that it is a fact that more men complete the act of suicide than women. And I won't get into that, but that is, the statistic.
And I also want to circle back to what we talked about with elementary teachers and nurses. And if you are a man and you go into those fields that are typically woman dominated, the immediate reaction, as I already said, is he must be gay, or his wife must wear the pants in that relationship.
Right.
And it's so bizarre, because we started the episode talking about those women jokes, and we're circling right back to them, but on the opposite side of the coin. So when you talk about men wanting to do things that are typically viewed as feminine, there's a joke made of it. And I think that's a huge disadvantage for men who their passion might be being a teacher, it might be being a nurse, or it might be something that is seen as feminine, and it's downtrodden simply because they're a man.
I work with a male teacher who is married to a woman principal, and jokes are made at his expense. So I completely agree with what you're saying, and I like the coming full circle argument. What impression do you get when someone says either apprehensively or adamantly that they are not feminist?
So I want to think about this in a slightly different way, and that when people say that they are a feminist, to me, that's an immediate green flag. I'm happy to know that. Knowing that someone is a feminist makes me more comfortable. At the same time, I truly do believe that feminist is still considered a dirty word for a lot of people, right or wrong. People who haven't educated themselves, they won't educate themselves either way. I'm not giving people a free pass in that regard, but I always tend to wonder what makes you so against that word feminist? What is your perception of the word that makes you say, no, I'm not a feminist?
I feel the same way. And I think a lot of people, that's what this whole episode is about. When you hear the word feminism, some people have negative reactions to that. So I do see it as a red flag, especially if someone proudly says that they're not feminist. I think maybe sometimes that's wrong for me because that's an opportunity to have a conversation. And basically, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but if you find yourself checking all the boxes that you care about rights for women, you care about rights for men, you want equality between men and women, you're a feminist.
And
Sorry.
this might be unfair to say, but I find myself becoming more uncomfortable when a woman says that they are not a feminist than a man. And that's probably really not right of me to say, because obviously I want all people to be feminists, because again, it's about women having equal rights and recognizing the power of a woman. But at the same time, I really do think it's more of a red flag when a woman is not a feminist than a man.
So not to go into this topic, but those are like the pick-me's of like Twitter that are like going after the man that is like adamantly not a feminist, and because the woman is interested in him, she'll be like, oh yeah, that's stupid. And any variation of that, I hate to go there. And every woman who's not a feminist may not be a pick-me, but a lot of the case,
it leaps right to mind.
Right, exactly. We're going to transition our talk of feminism into pop culture with Taylor Swift, who is a high-profile celebrity who, since the start of her career, has found herself in the center of feminist discourse, whether she wanted to or not. Emily, I know you to be one of the biggest Taylor Swift fans I know. I know you've been more or less following her music since the beginning. You've been on multiple tours. We saw her on the Reputation tour. Shout out, the one that rained the whole time. We made it into the documentary. We made it into the concert Netflix special. Not us, but the Rain show. I think I'm going to let you talk about what you've done to get ourselves some tickets. So before I get into that, we did have tickets to Loverfest, which was canceled because of COVID. So the question I want to ask you is, when did you first become a Taylor Swift fan?
So not to be like that girl, but I really do feel like I've been a fan since the beginning. I still remember it was summer 2006, and I remember because my best friend Rachel was on a cross-country road trip, and before she went, I made her a little silly little journal for her to like take notes and like tell me about her trip in. And I still have that journal. She gave it back to me, and in that journal, she wrote, "Have you heard this new song? It's called Tim McGraw, and it's by a girl called Taylor Swift." And I was like, by the time that I had gotten that journal back from her, it was after her trip, I had heard that song and I had fallen in love with it. And from that moment on, I was a Taylor Swift fan. We wound up going to see her as an opener for Rascal Flatts at the State Fair in 2008. And just from there, it kind of spiraled. We went to concerts. I went to the Speak Now tour, the Red tour, the 1989 tour, and then our Reputation tour. I've been there for it all. And as silly as it sounds, I really do feel like she's been a soundtrack for my life growing up. It started in middle school and it continued through graduation of college and on to me having my first job. She's always been that background noise for me. And it's made her really special to me.
So that's a pretty standard and straightforward Swiftie experience. My experience is a little more rocky becoming a Taylor Swift fan. Around the time that she really started to blow up, like I think I heard like Teardrops on My Guitar, but like she wasn't that big yet, was this time I was obsessed with a song called Girl Next Door by Saving Jane. The song came out in 2005. If you don't know that song, I want you to listen to it. It's called Girl Next Door by Saving Jane. And I was convinced that You Belong With Me, which was published in 2008, was plagiarized, copy and pasted. And if you know You Belong With Me well, I think you'll be able to at least hear what I'm talking about. So I had a vendetta against Taylor Swift because I was more like punk rock, like Paramore, Fall Out Boy. I like wasn't on the Taylor Swift bandwagon. I was like, she's a copycat and she's unoriginal because of You Belong With Me. Side note, there is a like 10-year-old fan music video on YouTube of a You Belong With Me gay version. And I love the song now. The first song I ever liked by her was Forever and Always. And when I was in high school, my friend Danielle, who appeared on an earlier episode, she started to drive me to and from school. And during that time, Speak Now came out. So we started listening to a lot of Speak Now, and Haunted was the only song that I liked. I was like, that's my jam. But slowly but surely, she started playing more and more songs that I started to like. So I think Speak Now was really my gateway album. I love Haunted. I slowly got around to Sparks Fly and a bunch of her other songs. And I think the thing that solidified me being a Swiftie was her song Safe and Sound for the Hunger Games soundtrack. Now, you probably don't know, listeners, but I am a very huge Hunger Games fan. I have Mockingjay tattoos on my back. Anyway, her song is the reason that I read the books. I don't know why. The single came out, I listened to it, I fell in love with it. I read all 3 books in has however long it takes anyone to read the Hunger Games. So that really solidified me being a Swiftie. Red was the first album that I was consciously present for the coming out of. And I remember when the Shake It Off video dropped. I remember the day that 1989 dropped, and like really from Red, which, no hate to me, please, but Red was not my favorite album. And then 1989, like, I loved, and so on and so forth. When was the first time you were made aware of or got involved in Taylor Swift feminist discourse? And as someone who is not the top Swiftie, I am going to answer this question first. I think I represent the more common everyman perception of Taylor Swift. And the first thing I remember was her reputation as a serial dater. It did honestly feel like she was dating someone new all the time. And also when, she would write songs, it would be about them and break up. So the joke was like, oh, you're going to date Taylor Swift. And then when you break up, she's going to write a song about you. The first time that I think really propelled me into the feminist aspect of the debate was her situation with Kanye West, where he went up on stage and took the mic from her. I just remember that erupting all across social media, and it really and we're going to talk about this later, but pitting women against each other, tearing down one successful woman in the name of another, and a man went up on stage and took the mic from Taylor Swift. So that really was it for me.
So I feel like for me, I remember defending her from the minute that Speak Now came out. She had then written 3 albums that were all about love, relationships, dating, men, and 2 of those 3 albums were centered on really prominent male celebrities, Joe Jonas and John Mayer. People had a lot to say about that. They would say she was jumping from man to man. She was doing it without a thought. And mind you, those albums really quickly showed that there were thoughts and there were emotions behind those relationships. I remember being in middle school, maybe even early high school, and talking with friends and family about how people weren't having those same conversations about Joe Jonas or John Mayer. They were having them all about Taylor Swift when they too were jumping from relationship to relationship. That feels dramatic to say, but
I just want to add that aside from Joe Jonas, but including later Jake Gyllenhaal, these are significantly older men. That was never a part of the conversation of Taylor Swift's dating, that these older men were dating a very young woman. I just wanted to add that.
And it became a conversation later on, but immediately she dated Harry Styles and Connor Kennedy. And both of them were younger than her, and people were quick to point that out. They were not quick to point out that John Mayer was significantly older, but they were quick to point out that those 2 were younger than her. I didn't label it as feminism at the time, but I remember it being confusing that the take on Taylor Swift was so different from the men that she had dated. And frankly, I found that it was annoying that she was at the middle of the conversations.
So what can we say about Taylor's dating history and her reputation?
So I just feel like the obsession with her dating history and other female celebrities' dating histories is so intense in comparison to any of the men that do the same thing. When we have male professional athletes who literally have physically beaten or assaulted their significant others or just women in the public, they continue to play their major league sports without a whole lot of pushback. but people saying that Taylor should be canceled because she's dated more than one person. Like, I just feel like there's a big shift in the conversation when it comes to Taylor Swift as a female celebrity. And I think it's frustrating. Her reputation has been tarnished based on not being happy with the person that she was dating when there are a lot worse things going on. It just feels a little ridiculous.
From a more outsider perspective at the time, I think it's fascinating how the media fixated on her relationships. She is probably the only celebrity, man or woman, that I could list 5 of her exes. I know that celebrities have a lot of relationships. I can literally, other than Taylor Swift, like maybe Brad Pitt, like Jennifer Aniston and Angelina Jolie. That is the extent that I can name male or woman exes. I'm not saying that Taylor Swift is in the wrong. I'm saying that the media's fixation on her and her relationships and in 2022, and especially, and we may get into this, her committed relationship that she's in now, it's such a low, cheap, uneducated jab to still in 2022 say that Taylor Swift dates everyone, is a serial dater, that kind of thing.
And people will still say that. And when you say she's been in a relationship with this man for the last several years, they'll be like, wait, what? Like,
right.
People will make those jokes without having any idea of her history.
And you know what's interesting? They can't name this one. That's interesting. Taylor Swift feminist discourse came to a head in 2017. Taylor Swift joined the Me Too movement. Taylor Swift appeared alongside Ashley Judd and 3 other women on the cover of Time magazine's Person of the Year edition, The Silence Breakers, and there was another anonymous woman to represent all the instances of sexual assault and assault that go unreported. What is the Me Too movement as you remember it?
So for me, the Me Too movement centered on trying to really show the widespread instances of sexual harassment and assault that our society tends not to talk about. I still remember when that movement first started blowing up and people were sharing Facebook statuses or they were sharing the cover of the magazine. And I still remember friends and some of my best friends posting Me Too. People I had told everything to and who had told me everything publicly posting Me Too about things that I did not know about. They were disclosing that they had been sexually harassed or assaulted. And as someone who at that time I felt like I was advocating for women and I knew of the dangers of sexual assault, I was blown away by how minimized it had been and how unaware I was of some of my closest friends being affected by it.
And this should go without saying, but some men were posting Me Too as well. And I remember seeing my social media feeds flooded with Me Too. And quite frankly, it made me horrified and I felt nothing but compassion and empathy. And I let everyone know that I was here and that I was listening. I personally did not see any pushback at the moment from the Me Too movement. I only saw positivity. We talked earlier about men and sexual assault, and I did not see any men who shared Me Too receive any kind of negative
And I completely
attention.
agree. I feel like in the moment, it was all very supportive. It was all very much so, like you said, that I'm here for you. There was not negative feedback at that time.
So what do you feel is the lasting impact of the Me Too movement?
So I do feel like women have become more comfortable speaking out in response to sexual harassment, sexual assault, things like that. But that said, with the amount of people that are still so quick to dismiss it as made up or for attention or for money or for whatever, I think a lot of women still won't speak up. And if they do, they're quick to drop it because of those targeted attacks almost.
Is Taylor Swift a good role model?
I think Taylor Swift has shown that she can be a good role model for others. She's a hard worker. She's an incredible songwriter, and she's spoken out for the things that she believes in. I will say I feel like she didn't always speak out for the things that she believed in. It took her some time. It took her joining a new record label. It took her growth as well to feel comfortable speaking out in such a public platform. Is she the end all be all perfect human? No, but who is? So I do believe that she is a good role model.
And I think I remember, especially country, like former country music artists, they do to some extent need to keep their especially political views quiet because they don't want to lose any of their listener base. And it was Taylor Swift's documentary, Miss Americana, where she came out as anti-Trump, and she kind of explained how she couldn't be quiet any longer. And I think that once celebrities start making their political views known, they kind of don't ever go back.
And even in that documentary, she got a lot of pushback. Her dad is vocal in that documentary of, you should not be doing this. As a grown woman, she was still getting pushback from her management, from others that worked with her, saying, you do not want to make this statement because you're going to alienate part of your fan base. And she ultimately said, I don't care. I think this is something that I need to say and that I need to be clear on because it matters to me.
So when we're talking about good role models, I think someone who makes that step absolutely fits the bill, in my opinion. Is Taylor Swift a feminist icon?
So to me, I consider Taylor a feminist, and I think she's done things to advocate for the rights of women and other marginalized groups. That said, that word icon, I kind of get myself stuck on. I think there are others who definitely deserve that title, feminist icon, but I don't know as she does. I don't know if that makes sense. I consider her a feminist and a leader in current members of the music industry as a feminist, but maybe not as an overall icon of the feminist movement.
So I think I wouldn't give her that label if she didn't want it. I think I would only consider her a feminist icon if she wanted to be considered one. I don't think it's fair to label her as one by default just because she's a woman at the top of her industry. That's a lot of pressure. If she were to come out and say, well, I mean, you're not going to self-declare yourself as an icon, but I wouldn't slap someone with that title if they weren't comfortable with it. And I think that creates a lot of expectations when you label someone a feminist icon. So I guess the short answer to the question would be no, but also she doesn't have to be a feminist icon. She can be a feminist.
And the fact that she's willing to speak out on being a feminist and being an advocate for marginalized groups, women and others.
So in case Taylor and others are listening, I don't want to name names, but I want to ask, how is Taylor Swift held to higher standards than others in the music industry from a consumer standpoint?
So I feel like even just talking about her writing abilities, she's an incredible lyricist, my own bias aside. She writes the majority of her own music, or at the bare minimum, she's a co-writer on almost every single song that she puts on her albums. I don't know many artists, men or women, who can say the same. I've not done a lot of research on that, but I don't know a lot of men or women, artists in the music industry, who can say, I wrote or co-wrote every song on my album.
And they usually don't start that way either. Taylor Swift started from the very beginning writing her own music.
And I feel like it extends even just beyond her writing her own music when you talk about her performances and the way that she gets up on stage and goes on tour. It's at a different level than what some other artists put out.
And those who are not fluent in Taylor Swift will keep those tired stereotypes at the forefront of their brains. They will always assume that Taylor Swift is writing about a breakup or a corny lyricist, but they don't recognize her growth like her true fans do. Like I said, in 2022, you better not be making 2010 Taylor Swift jokes.
And then just one more aside, like a few years ago, Taylor put on weight after suffering from an eating disorder for pretty much her entire career. And she talks about this in the Miss Americana documentary as well. She was ripped apart for looking bigger than she had before. Mind you, her bigger is smaller than I have ever been or could ever hope to be. But I remember family, friends making jokes about her weight gain and how she'd gotten bigger. I guarantee you there are men in the music industry and other women who've put on that same weight, probably more so men, that have put on that same weight that people didn't bat an eye at.
I think this isn't Taylor Swift specific, but it's common that women have to go the extra mile in the music industry to even be noticed. And there's a lot of discourse. So I'm not the best person to explain it, but if you do some research on YouTube, you can find some where a lot of women resort to sex, like not like actual sex, but like marketing themselves,
Sex appeal,
being naked and sometimes doing things that they don't want to do or that may even look bad because they need to stand out and get noticed. Men are free, as far as I'm concerned, of having to have any sex appeal, and that is not something that will make them marketable at the end of the day. And I want to even say, I said I wasn't going to say names, but Lil Nas X in his Industry Baby music video gets naked with a bunch of other naked men, and that was perceived very negatively. So again, we're coming full circle with negative double-edged swords. When women do it, it's one way, but when men do it, ew, no one wants to see that. My biggest issue is with male performers who dress up in plaid and jeans, and that's the show. Women, again, have to have the set pieces, the many costume changes. God forbid a woman is in a costume the entirety of her show, right? So again, maybe not Taylor Swift specific, but music industry specific. Women have to go the extra mile to even get noticed.
I was just at a concert of a male artist, and he came out and he wore the same outfit the entire time. He took off his jacket at one point. In that same concert, he had a special guest who showed up for the first song wearing one outfit, and when she came out for the next song that she was in halfway through the show, she had an outfit change. It wasn't even her concert, and she had the outfit change because that's what's expected of the woman. Mind you, the man played the whole show in his same outfit.
So what do we do in conversations where female music artists are sort of pitted against each other? And I think I want to go first because I want to set the stage. I hate shorthand Twitter hot takes like one gotta go. And how that works is on Twitter, someone will post a picture of 4 things and everyone comments and has discourse about the one that needs to go. And my issue with this is that it's never a good thing when you pit women against each other in any industry because, quite frankly, there are so few. And you may disagree with me. I'm not saying you, but a listener may be like, no, there's lots of women. Okay, but there's always more men and there's always more successful men. So first of all, when you're pitting women against each other, you're already at a disadvantage in my point. You shouldn't be doing that. When you're pitting minority women against each other, that's even worse in my opinion. And when you're pitting minority women against white women, I think that's terrible. So I'm sick of these Twitter hot takes. And I always say, this might be a stretch, but there's 2 movies that I love called The Book of Life and Coco by Disney Pixar. And they're the only 2 animated films I know about Dia de los Muertos. And people are always like, which one's better? Which one's better? Which one's better? And my response is, we only have 2 mainstream animated movies about Dia de Muertos. Why are we picking one? I love having both. So that's just kind of where I'm at. I'm sick of, and then I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but scrolling through Twitters and just having your feelings hurt. You just see a tweet that's just if you listen to Taylor Swift and you're like, wow, I didn't, I wasn't even expecting that.
Well, even Taylor Swift fans against Taylor Swift fans, where they're like, if you think that this song is one of her best songs, you have another thing coming. How could you even compare it to the greatness that is ba 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 ba?
Right. And so in my opinion, we should, and this will never happen as long as, sorry, but straight men exist. We should stop pitting women against each other and celebrate the women that are in the industry. So what do you have to say about that?
And I completely agree with you. And I also think it's just so important for us to be aware of it, to be cognizant of it. I think back to when we were younger and we were watching Christina Aguilera and Britney Spears get pitted against each other. It was constantly, which one are you going to pick? Or even NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys. It's which one are you going to pick? We're constantly, as a society, pitting 2 things against each other. And I think it's particularly frustrating when it's 2 women, or as you said, a white woman versus a minority woman, or anything in that regard. I think pitting women against women has always been around, and I think being aware of it is the first step in making it change or in making it stop. We're allowed to like more than one person's music. Just because these 2 have a similar genre, they have a similar sound, doesn't mean you can't like both. Or if they have 2 very different sounds, or if they dated one another. It doesn't mean that you have to choose one over the other. In fact, I think we should like more than one person's music. It makes sense. Not just blindly taking sides and being open to supporting who we love, regardless of what other people have to say about it.
And can I just say, we're being very high-minded here, and we're giving people who pit women against each other way more credit than they're probably worthy of, because at the end of the day, it's going to come down to boobs or looks and who's hotter. So we're having very high-minded discourse here, but
that's not what's at play.
Right. So this discussion of Taylor Swift and feminism wouldn't be complete without talking about her song, The Man, off of her Lover album. And it encompasses most of what we talked about in this episode. And I want to ask, what can you say about this song? Why do you think she felt it was necessary? How does it prove the points we've been talking about today?
I think that song is almost her feminist moment. It was almost her saying, I am going to take on that label. And it's not fair of me to say that when I don't know that that's her perspective. But to me, when that song first played, when I first listened to that song off of Lover, I remember my jaw dropping because she was saying things that everyone has thought, or at least a lot of people have thought before, but who they have not come out and said it. And especially not in a public song that is going to be played in concerts, on the radio, at award shows. She said things that earlier Taylor, I don't think would have said. I remember being really proud of her, as odd as that sounds, because it felt like she was speaking out on what she believed in and saying, it's not right that I'm being treated differently because I'm not a man.
And from my perspective, the whole song is about, if I was a man, would all this be easier? Would all this be handed to me in a way that wasn't because I'm a woman? And actually, the music video is Taylor in drag, which I was not aware of when I first started watching it. But you're like, wait, you know what I mean? Her song, if you haven't heard it, you should give it a listen. It basically encompasses all of what this discussion is about.
And just saying, like you said, it's a question of like, would this be different if I was a man? And I think it is a question, but it's also her saying like, it would be different if I was a man. I fully recognize it. I fully see the stereotypes in this industry. I fully see how men are treated versus how I'm treated. And even the commentary on another man's girlfriend, of the age of that girlfriend, when her own dating life has been ripped apart. So her saying, I'm going to flip this right on its side and turn it back on you because it's always been a point of criticism on me.
And you mentioned dating, and there's a part in the song where she says, if I was getting all these girls, I'd be a baller. But, you know, there's the double expectation in society where women, if they have a lot of partners, they're whores, they're sluts. But when men do all those things,
good for them.
Right. And like you aspire to be them in a way. I just want to talk about this exercise quick that I do in my psychology class, where I basically give my kids a free pass to say any swear word that they want to say. And actually, I was taught this exercise by one of my friends in college, and that is to let them swear, basically insults that target sexuality and gender. So you can use your imagination if you want to pause the podcast and, you know, start listing out swear words, insults that are sexually based. All right. What you'll find is that most of them are exclusively towards women. They're words that we use to put down women, but also to put down men. I think only very recently have men had their like first slur, and that is F-boy, which I'm like really thankful for that we finally have one. And, you know, in class, kids will say that, or like dick, you know? So like men have two. Women have a lot. When you're saying these things to a man, when you're calling a man a P word, I just got to keep it family friendly. You are saying to that man that the worst thing that they can be is a woman. And if you call women those things, you're saying that the worst thing that woman can be is a woman. So think about that. Think about how when we emasculate men, when we make fun of men for being gay, we're saying you're woman-like, and that is bad. So that's just something I wanted to add, and I wanted you to consider if you're listening. For our last question, I want to ask, what would you say to someone who is apprehensive about feminism? How can we include them in the conversation about feminism and maybe sway them to join the cause?
So I think it's important to think about how we approach it, not to dictate how women respond to things. There are plenty of people out there already who do that on their own, but I think it's important to be gentle in our questioning. Why are you apprehensive about feminism? I think asking people to reflect on their own beliefs and seeing where their misconceptions lie or where those misconceptions come from can be helpful in moving forward. I don't think arguing and saying like, you need to be a feminist will solve anything. And I think even the way I'm saying that, I'm frustrating myself because I think I'm even playing into that like, I don't want to appear as a stereotypical feminist. That's not how I mean it, but I do think you have to be gentle about it because other people will dismiss you really quickly if you're aggressive about it. Continuing to stand up for what we believe in, but being respectful and kind will go a long way. That being said, simply being kind isn't going to solve everything. But just like I teach my students, I really do think that being kind and respectful can help you get your point across in a way that's more understanding and approachable for others. I recognize, though, that this is like a super privileged take that I have based on my own experiences.
So I think I mentioned this earlier in the episode, but if someone was apprehensive about feminism, I would kind of give them a checklist because at the end of the day, it's probably the label they aren't comfortable with, not the ideology. So not to be like sneaky, but I'd be like, should women make equal wages? Should women be able to become president? Should women not be sexually assaulted? Like that kind of thing. And I feel like for most people, their answer is going to be yes, 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 yes. Then it's like, congratulations, you're a feminist. And I just want to draw a comparison to Obamacare, hugely out of left field, I know. When you describe affordable healthcare or you describe Obamacare, I think there's a lot of things that people would agree with, but when they hear Obamacare, that shuts them down completely. So if someone was apprehensive about identifying as a feminist, I would say at least have the ideology. If you don't want to identify as a feminist, just make sure you don't want women subservient and going back to the 1800s.
And I think I said that earlier as well, that feminist is still considered a dirty word for a lot of people. And I think that plays right into it. Like, do I want you to give yourself the label feminist? Yes. However, if you are not actively being anti-feminist in your actions and in your words, you're on the right track. Ideally, you need to recognize that if you're supportive of basic rights for women, you are a feminist, but I know that a lot of people aren't comfortable with that label.
And again, we're being very high-minded. There are people who don't like women.
And that want women to submit. And that
actively online, incels, people who live in their mom's basements, men. Okay. But anyway, I have two surprise questions for you. Taylor Swift does a lot of fan interaction. Does Taylor Swift know who you are?
In my hope, Taylor Swift knows who I am. I, as a fangirl,
the short answer is no. She does
have
not.
Written letters and put myself out there. However, Taylor Swift does not know who I am. Maybe she will listen to this podcast and learn who I am.
So that was my next question. If Taylor Swift is listening, what do you want to say to Taylor?
I would just like to say thank you for all that you've given me and all that you've taught me, knowingly or clearly unknowingly, because you've truly helped shape me into the type of person that I am. And in being willing to speak up for myself and speak out for others, I don't think pre-Taylor Swift I would be sitting here having this conversation with you. And I know there's a lot of other factors at play, but just thanks.
Taylor, if you're listening, DM me, please. Let's get together for lunch. We love you. Emily, I want to thank you so much for having you on the show. I couldn't deliver information on Taylor Swift without the biggest Swiftie I know in my life.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, this is clearly something I'm passionate about, and it was nice to be able to talk about it in a free platform and to be able to kind of have this back and forth and share what I know and share what I love about Taylor.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Exit Talks, and we'll see you next time.